All right, I'm here in Houston, Texas, alongside former presidential candidate and Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. What brings you to H-Town? Is it the fights, or you doing some other things
Yes,
here?
no, I came for the fights. I'm building in a few other things, but I'm really looking forward to, the big fight tomorrow night.
And you're going to the event, I assume.
I am,
Is
yes.
this the first time you've gone to a UFC card?
This is the second time. The first one was the Jung Lee's
Yes.
first fight in Vegas.
Yep. UFC 248. I was at that one as well.
It was pretty epic.
Yeah, it was pretty
gotta
cool.
say.
I think these fights are going to be great as well. Do you have a favorite fighter? Like, were you a fan of MMA at all
Yeah.
before Zhang Weili came along?
Yeah, I grew up doing martial arts, different martial arts in Hawaii, and first started really paying attention to the organized sport of MMA when Gina Carano came on the scene, but have been a fan for a lot of years. And obviously from Hawaii, we're really proud of Max Holloway. We're proud of a lot of our fighters. Ilima, also out of Hawaii. There's too many to name, but it's great to see how the sport is growing, and just with every fight, I think the level of talent you just see is like the bar is getting raised higher and higher.
What are your thoughts on BJ Penn's governor run?
Yeah, I think he's making a serious run at this. This is not just a gimmick. And his run for governor in Hawaii is coming from a place of a lot of frustration that people have with the current leadership in Hawaii, and how they have handled or mishandled a lot of the COVID pandemic response.
And that's something I wanted to talk to you about. Pertaining to our world in MMA, regional MMA events have not been able to really be held there. I think April, apparently, I talked to Bob Ostovich last night, who's a big promoter in Hawaii, and he was saying he's going to be able to apply for a permit in April from the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, but that he's not sure because of the restrictions if it's something that he could feasibly put on if everybody's going to have to be vaccinated. So can you talk about that, kind of the impact that it's had on Hawaii for not just MMA, but for other small businesses and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think what the challenges people in Hawaii have faced within MMA are kind of similar to the challenges we faced as a country, where a lot of restrictions have been put in place. A lot of people have been really patient as we've gone through this challenging time together and wanting to keep each other safe. But it gets to a point where leaders are making decisions that seem to be more about control and power rather than about true public health and safety. And I think that's, again, where a lot of the frustration is coming from. In Hawaii in particular, there have been no MMA fights really since the pandemic began, yet local leaders have allowed for concerts to happen with thousands of people gathering and other things. So you just have to ask the question, why are you discriminating against one sport versus another in the name of or another event in the name of public health? And so when things don't make sense, I think people are rightly frustrated and angry.
And this is maybe a complicated question, but where do you think that balance is? Like, do you feel like now these events should be able to go off without a hitch at this point in time? Do you feel like there is some sort of middle ground that can be found?
I think there has to be middle ground that can be found. Again, if people are making decisions that are based on like actual science and what's in the best public interest, then I think there's certainly a way forward. We've gone through a lot as a state and as a country throughout this time, and I think we're at a place where people should be able to make their own decisions about the vaccine. People should be able to make their own decisions if they have health concerns. Wear an N95 mask. Wear something that will help protect you. Other people who don't have those concerns, people should make their own decisions for themselves.
Okay. And I got to ask you, going along with that as well, we're catching you at a good time because Joe Rogan's in the news a lot. I know you've been on his podcast a couple of times. Kind of seems like there's two controversies that are going on right now. One, they might be related, they might not be. One is the fact that he's had some music artists pull out of Spotify trying to protest his podcast because of the guests that he's had on. Spotify's come out and said that they're not going to silence him. Then the second one was, a video resurfaced of him using the N-word. And I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on those two things and how they may or may not be intertwined.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten to know Joe. I consider him a good friend. He's like the nicest, most generous, humble guy. And I think he's done the right thing in addressing these issues that have come up very directly, very honestly, and been very ready to admit how can he be better and apologizing. I think it's what we would hope to get from anyone, really. And I think how not only a lot of the kind of corporate response has been, but also, frankly, the White House inserting itself into trying to cancel Joe Rogan points to the bigger issue, which is really the attempts by the power elite trying to silence and cancel people who dare to question the establishment narrative, who dare to maybe hold a different view, and that response, trying to cancel people, silence them, and smear their character, is the age-old tactic. I've been on the receiving end of it, so I know exactly how that feels, and it is so dangerous because it undermines free speech in America.
You know, it's interesting you bring up free speech, you bring up cancel culture, because I think there's some people that say, hey, Neil Young, you know, that's his free speech, he's exercising it. I know the White House is maybe a little bit of a different scenario there, but do you think that this is like a, you know, an orchestrated sort of way to push Joe, you know, out of the spotlight, out of control, or do you feel like that the people that kind of are on the other side of the aisle from him, do you think that they're just utilizing their free speech?
Both, I think, are true. Neil Young is free to do whatever he wants. The decisions that anyone makes are, you know, the decision that Spotify has made to keep Joe Rogan. I mean, people are free to make their own decisions. People shouldn't be canceled for one decision or another. And the attacks on Joe Rogan from all of these different directions, starting with kind of conversations about COVID and the science of the vaccines and the different things, but it's progressed beyond that, which really just shows from the beginning that this has been a very concerted attempt to try to deplatform him. And again, Joe Rogan is only one example. He is certainly not the only voice that has been kind of punished in this way.
And I guess, you know, with that, do you feel like he has any responsibility? Because I think that's been another thing. You know, he has a responsibility to kind of vet these conversations that go on or not allow certain people to have a platform. Do you feel like, as a podcast host with his outreach, that he has any sort of responsibility to do that?
Joe Rogan is very transparent about who he is. And the fact that these conversations he has are because he likes to learn, and he likes to have interesting conversations. He doesn't pretend to be a journalist. He's not pretending to be anything or anyone other than who he is. The beauty of free speech in America is exactly that whether you're someone with a YouTube channel or you're vlogging or you've got a podcast, you have the opportunity to say what you feel, voice your opinions. I think it's a very different. I think the what do you call it? Kind of the contrast and the hypocrisy coming from a lot of his critics saying that he should be fact checking people who he has on his show. What I hear are people who haven't listened to his show, and how often he is fact checking, how often he's saying, hey, well, let's actually look that up, and how often he says, oh wow, I guess I was wrong about that. And how little we see of that on the mainstream media. Again, I've been on the receiving end of this, where someone says something in an attempt to make a political attack. There's no attempt to fact check that information or stick with the truth. So again, the underlying point here, Joe Rogan is the latest example, but I wish people would focus on the underlying issue, which is how these kinds of attacks and attempts to deplatform or cancel people, whether you agree with what they're saying or not, is a direct attack on our free speech, and that's something every single American should be really, really concerned about.
And, interestingly enough, I think the other thing that people kind of were saying, and Joe did address this in his video about balancing guests out, and I saw a list that was going around that was viral, and it had conservatives and liberals, and you were actually listed under being a conservative that was on his podcast. So do you feel like that's an out of proportion, like a blown out of proportion sort of criticism, or do you think that he could do a better job of balancing?
No, I saw that list and it was ridiculous, and ridiculous in how it was made up, but also not at all representative of the diversity of voices that Joe Rogan has on his show. Again, like I don't know how he invites guests. I'm guessing like, hey, that's an interesting person. I'd love to have them on the show. I think it's as simple as that, and understanding like his curiosity and his interest in hearing different voices. I think we as a country are stronger when we allow for diverse conversations, different views to be brought forward that can help us maybe think about things differently or better understand someone who's coming from a different place, it's a dangerous thing when people are only willing to stay in their little safe corner with people they agree with and therefore judge, other eyes, build caricatures around anyone with a different viewpoint. And that's what's driving the divisiveness in America, where I will only sit with my tribe because we agree with each other and we think we're all great and everyone else is wrong. And I think that's what Rogan and others who encourage this kind of dialogue are encouraging people to, hey, think about things, ask questions. It may affirm your beliefs or it may cause you to start to think about things in a slightly different way, and that's a good thing.
In the video that surfaced, do you feel like, there's some people out there that are saying that he's a racist. There's some people that said he said something racist but apologized, and then there's other people saying that he shouldn't have apologized. Kind of where do you fall on that?
I think what Joe Rogan said in his response speaks for itself, and he apologized and expressed his own regret. None of us are perfect, and allowing for people to express that regret when they've done something wrong and move on from it is something I think we would all hope others would allow us the opportunity to do.
All right, let's end on a little bit more of an optimistic note. Yeah. UFC Hawaii, is that something that we're ever going to see? I know, especially right now, it's always been difficult. There's always been certain hurdles. Dana White has talked about how this, there might not be an indoor stadium that they could fit people in. There's a time difference, but particularly right now with mandates, he's only going to states that allow him pretty much to just put on a show. Yeah. So do you feel like it's something that we'll ever get to see?
Yes. I am holding on to my optimism that we'll get the UFC out to Hawaii. I think the logistical things, I think we can overcome the logistics. I think it's a matter of the local leaders in Hawaii really sitting down with the UFC and working it out.
Awesome. Congresswoman, I appreciate the time.
Nice talking to you, Nolan. Thank you.